The stars looked different through the viewport of the UHS Pioneer as Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the unknown solar system grow larger on their screens. 3 months of traveling through hyperspace had brought them to the edge of human exploration, further from Earth than any human had ever gone before. The ship hummed quietly around him as his crew worked at their stations, all of them knowing they were about to make history. "Captain, we're picking up energy." "Readings from the third planet," said Commander Lisa Park from her position at the sensor station. She was a tall woman with short black hair who had served with Morrison for 5 years, and he trusted her judgment completely. "The readings look artificial, sir. Definitely not natural formations." Morrison felt his heart beat faster. After decades of searching the galaxy, humanity had finally found signs of intelligent alien life. He walked over to the main display, where Dr. Alex Turner was already studying the incoming data. Turner was their xenobiologist, a thin man with glasses who had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. "What do you think, Alex?" Morrison asked quietly. Turner adjusted his glasses and pointed at the screen. "The energy patterns are unlike anything we've seen before, Captain. They're organized and purposeful, but they don't match any known technology. Whatever is down there, it's definitely not human." The ship's communications officer, Lieutenant Ben Hayes, suddenly looked up from his station. "Captain, we're being scanned. Something on the planet is definitely aware of our presence." Morrison nodded and took a deep breath. This was the moment every human had dreamed of since they first looked up at the stars. "All stop. Hold position at the edge of the system. Send a basic mathematical sequence on all frequencies. Let them know we're intelligent." For 3 hours they waited, sending simple mathematical patterns and receiving no response. Then, just as Morrison was beginning to wonder if they had imagined the whole thing, Lieutenant Hayes jumped up from his chair. "Captain, we're receiving a response. It's mathematical, but it's more complex than what we sent. They're showing us advanced geometric patterns." Dr. Turner rushed to the communication station and studied the incoming signals. "This is incredible, Captain. They're not just responding to our mathematics. They're expanding on it. Look at this sequence here. They're showing us mathematical relationships that our best scientists are only beginning to understand." Over the next several hours, the two species slowly built a basic communication system using mathematics and simple pictographs. The aliens, who called themselves the Colovians, invited the human ship to approach their planet, which they called Verdania Prime Dot, as the Pioneer descended through the atmosphere. Morrison and his crew stared in wonder at the world below them. Vast forests covered most of the continents, but these were unlike any forests on Earth. The trees were enormous, some reaching several miles into the sky, and they seemed to glow with a soft green light. Cities were built into and around these giant trees, creating a harmony between nature and civilization that took Morrison's breath away. The ship landed in a clearing near one of the largest tree cities, and Morrison led a small team outside to meet the aliens face to face. What they found was beyond anything they had imagined. The Colovians were humanoid, but clearly plant-based, with skin that looked like smooth bark and hair that resembled flowing leaves. They moved with a grace that seemed almost like dancing, and their large eyes held an intelligence and kindness that immediately put the humans at ease. The Colovian, who approached them first, was tall and elegant, with silver-green skin and leaves that shimmered in the sunlight. Through their basic communication system, she identified herself as Zara Velyan, an ambassador for her people. Dr. Turner worked frantically to improve their translation system, and within days they were able to have real conversations. Zara explained that the Colovians had been watching the stars for thousands of years, waiting for other intelligent species to find them. They were peaceful by nature, spending their time studying the natural world and developing technologies that worked in harmony with their environment. "We have been alone for so long," Zara told Morrison as they walked through one of the tree cities. "To finally meet others who think and dream as we do, it fills our hearts with joy." Morrison was amazed by what he saw around him. The Kelovians had developed incredible biotechnology, growing their buildings and tools instead of manufacturing them. They could heal injuries with special plant compounds, and their cities produced no pollution because everything was part of the natural ecosystem. In return, the humans shared their own knowledge of engineering and space travel. The Kelovians were fascinated by human machines and computer systems, and they quickly began experimenting with combining their biotechnology with human engineering. After 2 weeks on Verdania Prime, Morrison had formed a strong friendship with Zara and several other Kelovians. They were gentle, curious people who seemed to genuinely care about the well-being of all living things. It was impossible not to like them. One evening, as Morrison and Zara sat beneath one of the great trees watching the sunset, an older Kelovian approached them. This was Elder Kef Mordan, one of the oldest and wisest of his people. His bark-like skin was darker than the others, and his leaf hair had turned silver with age. "I must speak with you about dangerous matters," the elder said in his slow, careful way. "There are others in this part of the galaxy who are not as peaceful as we are." Zara's expression grew worried. "Elder Kef speaks of the Zephyrian Empire. They are a military alliance that has been expanding across many star systems. We have avoided them by staying hidden, but their scout ships have been seen near our borders." Elder Kef nodded gravely. "The Zephyrians believe that the strong should rule the weak. They conquer peaceful worlds and enslave the populations. Many species have fallen to their armies, and those who resist are destroyed completely." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. "How powerful are they?" "Very powerful," Elder Kef replied. "They have many species under their control, and their warships are numerous. They rule through fear and violence, taking what they want and destroying what they cannot use." "We have tried to remain neutral," Zara added. "We hope that if we stayed hidden in our forests, they would leave us alone. But recent intelligence suggests they know about us now." Morrison stood up and looked at both Kelovians seriously. "Zara, Elder Kef, I want you to know something important. Humanity values friendship above almost everything else. If the Zephyrians threaten you, they threaten us as well. We will not abandon our friends." Zara's large eyes filled with something that looked like gratitude mixed with hope. "You would truly stand with us against such a powerful enemy?" "Without question," Morrison replied firmly. "That's what friends do." Before leaving Verdania Prime, Morrison established a small human embassy near the main Kelovian city and provided them with defensive shield generators that could protect their most important facilities. He also promised to send regular patrol ships to monitor Zephyrian activity in the area. As the Pioneer prepared to depart, Zara gave Morrison a small cutting from one of their sacred trees. "Plant this on your homeworld," she said. "Let it grow as our friendship grows." Morrison accepted the gift with deep respect. "The galaxy is about to learn something important about humanity, Zara. We protect our friends, no matter the cost." The Pioneer lifted off from Verdania Prime, carrying the hopes of 2 species and the seeds of an alliance that would soon change the balance of power in their corner of the galaxy. 6 months had passed since Captain Jake Morrison first shook hands with Ambassador Zira Velyon on Verdania Prime, and the friendship between humans and Kelovians had grown stronger with each passing day. Trade ships moved regularly between human space and the Kelovian worlds, carrying new technologies and ideas in both directions. The small human embassy on Verdania Prime had grown into a thriving cultural center where both species learned from each other. But the peaceful progress was about to be shattered by reports that made General Marcus Cole's blood run cold as he read them in his office on the human military base at New Geneva. Cole was a veteran soldier with gray hair and hard eyes who had seen combat on 3 different worlds. But the intelligence reports coming across his desk described something worse than any war he had ever witnessed. The first reports came from Captain Nina Ross, commander of the patrol vessel UHS Guardian, which had been conducting routine sweeps near the Altarian system. Ross was a tough officer with 15 years of space service, and her voice was steady but grim as she transmitted her findings back to headquarters. "General Cole, you need to see this," Ross said over the long-range communication system. "We arrived at Altair 7 expecting to find the usual mining colony of about 50,000 people. Instead, we found nothing but smoking ruins and empty slave pens." The images that followed the transmission showed scenes of complete devastation. The Altarian mining facilities had been reduced to twisted metal and ash. The residential areas where families had lived and children had played were now empty craters in the ground. Most disturbing of all were the massive holding areas that had clearly been built to contain large numbers of prisoners. "The survivors we found hiding in the outer settlements all tell the same story," Ross continued. "A fleet of unknown warships appeared without warning and demanded immediate surrender. When the colonists tried to negotiate, the aliens began orbital bombardment. Those who survived the initial attack were rounded up and loaded onto prison ships." General Cole forwarded the reports immediately to Admiral Beth Warren at Human Space Command headquarters on Earth. Warren was a brilliant strategist who had risen through the ranks during humanity's expansion into space, and she understood the implications immediately. "Get me everything we have on these attackers," Warren ordered her intelligence staff. "Ship designs, weapons technology, tactical patterns, everything." The analysis that came back painted a picture of an enemy unlike anything humans had encountered before. The attacking ships were clearly built for conquest rather than exploration, with heavy armor and powerful weapons designed to overwhelm planetary defenses quickly. The tactics showed no concern for civilian casualties and seemed designed to spread terror as much as achieve military objectives. More reports began flooding in from across the sector. The peaceful Centauri research stations were attacked and their scientists enslaved. The neutral trading post at Kepler Station was destroyed when its inhabitants refused to pay tribute to the unknown invaders. Each attack followed the same pattern: overwhelming force, brutal efficiency, and the systematic enslavement of any survivors. Ambassador Kyle Stevens, the human diplomatic representative to the Colovian Confederation, sent increasingly urgent messages from Verdania Prime. Stevens was a career diplomat who had hoped to spend his assignment building peaceful relationships, but now found himself preparing for war. The Calovian intelligence network is extensive. Stevens reported to General Cole. "They've been tracking these attackers for months, and the news is not good. The enemy calls themselves the Zephyrian Empire, and they're led by a reptilian species that believes in conquest through overwhelming force. The Zephyrians, according to Colovian intelligence, had been expanding across their region of the galaxy. For over a century, they ruled through a combination of superior firepower and systematic terror, conquering peaceful worlds and forcing the survivors to serve their military machine. Any species that proved useful was enslaved, while those who resisted too strongly were simply exterminated. The worst part," Stevens continued, "is that they've been studying us. Zephyrian scout ships have been observed near human colonies for weeks, gathering information about our defenses and technology. They seem particularly interested in our industrial capabilities." War Commander Sektar Voss, the leader of the Zephyrian expansion fleet, made his intentions clear in a broadcast that was intercepted by human listening posts throughout the sector. Voss was a massive reptilian creature with scarred armor and cold, calculating eyes that showed no mercy for his enemies. To all species in this region of space, Voss announced in his harsh, guttural voice, the Zephyrian Empire claims dominion over these systems. You will submit to our authority and provide tribute, or you will be removed. There are no other options. The broadcast went on to detail the tribute demands: raw materials, manufactured goods, and a percentage of each world's population to serve as laborers in Zephyrian projects. Any attempt to resist or flee would result in the complete destruction of the offending world. Admiral Warren called an emergency meeting of the Human Colonial Council to discuss the threat. Representatives from dozens of human worlds gathered via holographic communication to debate their response to the Zephyrian ultimatum. "We have to face facts," said Counselor Robert Blake from the industrial world of New Pittsburgh. "Our military forces are spread across hundreds of light years protecting our colonies. We don't have the concentrated firepower to take on an empire that's been conquering worlds for a century." But Counselor Maria Santos from the agricultural world of Green Valley disagreed strongly. "We can't just abandon our allies to these monsters. The Kelovians trusted us when we promised to stand by them. If we break that promise now, what does that say about humanity?" General Cole presented the military analysis to the council. Human technology was generally superior to what the Zephyrians were using, but their numbers were overwhelming. Intelligence estimates suggested the Zephyrian Empire controlled over 40 star systems and could field thousands of warships if necessary. However, Cole added, their tactics rely heavily on intimidation and overwhelming force. They're not used to fighting enemies who can match their technology or who refuse to be intimidated. Their empire is also held together more by fear than loyalty, which could be a weakness we can exploit. Despite the military concerns, the political leadership of humanity was divided. Some wanted to negotiate with the Zephyrians, hoping to avoid a costly war that could devastate human colonies. Others argued for immediate military action before the Zephyrians could grow even stronger. While the politicians debated, Captain Nina Ross continued her patrols near Kelovian space and reported increasing Zephyrian military activity. Large fleets were gathering at the edge of the sector, and reconnaissance ships were conducting detailed scans of Kelovian worlds. "They're definitely planning something big," Ross reported to General Cole. "The fleet movements suggest they're preparing for a major offensive, and all signs point to the Kelovian systems as their primary target." Ambassador Stevens worked frantically with Zara Velyon and the other Kelovian leaders to prepare some kind of defense. But the peaceful plant people had no experience with warfare. Their entire civilization was built around harmony and cooperation, and they struggled to understand the mindset of a species that would destroy an entire world just to make a point. "We have offered to share our healing technologies with the Zephyrians," Zara told Stevens during one of their emergency meetings. "We have proposed trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Surely they must see that cooperation is more beneficial than conquest." Stevens wished he could share her optimism, but his experience with human history told him otherwise. "Zara, some species can't be reasoned with. The Zephyrians don't want cooperation. They want dominance. They see your peaceful nature as weakness, to be exploited." Elder Kef Mordan, despite his great age and wisdom, was equally puzzled by the Zephyrian mindset. "In all our thousands of years of existence, we have never encountered beings who choose destruction over creation, hatred over love. How can such creatures exist?" As reports continued to pour in of Zephyrian atrocities across the sector, General Cole began mobilizing what forces he could without direct authorization from the Human Colonial Council. He positioned patrol ships near the most likely invasion routes and began secret preparations to evacuate human personnel from Verdania Prime if necessary. Captain Ross detected the first signs of the coming storm when her sensors picked up massive energy signatures at the edge of Calovian space. A Zephyrian fleet of unprecedented size was moving into position, their ships bristling with weapons and their intentions unmistakably hostile. "General Cole," Ross transmitted urgently, "they're coming. One count at least 200 warships heading. Directly for Verdania Prime. The invasion is beginning." As the Zephyrian fleet moved closer to the peaceful Calovian homeworld, War Commander Voss prepared to deliver a message that would echo across the galaxy and forever change the relationship between humanity and the stars. The morning sky above Verdania Prime had never looked more beautiful, with 3 of the system's moons still visible as pale crescents against the dawn light filtering through the great forest canopy. Ambassador Zara Vel Yon stood on the highest platform of the main tree city, watching human and Calovian children play together in the gardens. Below, while their parents worked side by side in the research centers and workshops that had become symbols of interspecies cooperation, Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Hayes stood beside her, his weathered face grim as he studied the tactical display on his portable scanner. Hayes commanded the small human defense force stationed on Verdania Prime, just 200 soldiers who had volunteered to stay and help protect their Calovian friends. He was a career military officer who had seen combat on the frontier worlds, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for what was coming. "The Zephyrian fleet will be in weapons range within 6 hours," Hayes told Zara quietly, not wanting to alarm the civilians nearby. "Our shield generators are in position around the major population centers, but we don't have enough to protect everyone." Dr. Emma Clark hurried up the spiral walkway that led to their observation platform, her face flushed with exhaustion from 3 days of continuous work preparing the evacuation procedures. Clark was a xenobiologist who had been studying Calovian healing technology, but now found herself coordinating the desperate effort to save as many lives as possible. "The evacuation ships are loaded and ready," Clark reported breathlessly. "Captain Tony Blake has the UHS Mercy positioned in the outer system, with transport capacity for 15,000 Calovians. But that's less than 1% of the population." Zara's large, gentle eyes filled with sadness as she looked out over her beloved homeworld. The great trees that had stood for thousands of years swayed gently in the morning breeze, their luminescent leaves creating patterns of light and shadow that had inspired Calovian artists for countless generations. Soon, much of this beauty would be gone forever. "My people have made their choice," Zara said with quiet dignity. "The elders have decided that we cannot abandon our sacred groves and the younger trees that depend on our care. We will stay and face whatever comes." Hayes felt his jaw clench with frustration and admiration. The Calovians were so peaceful that many of them literally could not comprehend the concept of deliberate violence. Even now, with a massive invasion fleet approaching, many still believed that diplomacy and kindness could resolve the crisis. The first sign of the coming attack appeared as bright flashes of light in the upper atmosphere as the Zephyrian fleet dropped out of hyperspace. War Commander Sektar Voss had brought over 300 warships to crush the peaceful world, far more than necessary to overcome any possible resistance. This was meant to be a demonstration of Zephyrian power that would terrorize every species. In the sector, all human personnel to defensive positions, Hayes ordered over his communication system. "Remember, our job is to buy time for the evacuation and protect as many civilians as possible." The Zephyrian bombardment began without warning or demand for surrender. Massive energy beams lanced down from orbit, targeting the largest Calovian cities with devastating precision. The ancient tree cities that had taken centuries to grow were vaporized in seconds, along with thousands of innocent civilians who had never harmed anyone in their entire lives. Hayes watched in horror as the shield generators he had positioned around the main population centers flickered and failed under the intense bombardment. The human technology was advanced, but it had never been designed to withstand this level of sustained firepower from an entire fleet. "Amma, get those evacuation ships moving now," Hayes shouted over the roar of explosions that were getting closer. "By the minute. Blake needs to get those civilians out of here before the Zephyrians start landing ground troops." Dr. Clark coordinated the frantic evacuation effort from the human embassy, which had become a temporary command center. Thousands of Kelovian civilians streamed toward the landing zones, where human transport ships waited to carry them to safety. But for everyone who escaped, 10 more were trapped by the spreading destruction. Captain Tony Blake pushed his ships, engines beyond safe limits, as he made repeated trips between the planet and the outer system, each time carrying as many Kelovian refugees as his ship could hold. Blake was a transport pilot who had volunteered for what everyone knew was likely a suicide mission, but he refused to abandon his post while people still needed rescue. "This is Blake to Hayes," the captain transmitted during one of his brief stops to pick up another load of refugees. "The Zephyrians are starting to jam our communications and target the evacuation ships. I can maybe make 2 more runs before they shoot us down." The Zephyrian ground assault began 3 hours after the orbital bombardment started, with massive troop transports landing in the areas where the great tree cities had stood. Thousands of reptilian soldiers poured out of the ships, equipped with energy weapons and capture devices designed to take prisoners rather than kill them outright. Hayes and his small force of human soldiers fought a desperate running battle through the burning forests, trying to slow the Zephyrian advance long enough for more civilians to reach the evacuation points. The humans were vastly outnumbered, but their superior training and equipment allowed them to inflict heavy casualties on the invaders. "Sir, we've got Kelovian civilians trapped in the research center," reported Sergeant Mike Torres over the tactical communications network. "The Zephyrians have them surrounded, but they're not killing them. Looks like they want prisoners." Hayes understood immediately. The Kelovians' natural healing abilities made them extremely valuable as slaves, and the Zephyrians intended to capture as many as possible for use in their empire. This realization made the situation even more horrifying than simple genocide would have been. Ambassador Zara had refused all offers of evacuation, instead staying to help coordinate the rescue of Kelovian children and elders who could not flee. On their own, she worked tirelessly alongside Dr. Clark, guiding refugees to safety even as the sounds of battle grew closer to their position. "Zara, you have to go," Clark pleaded as explosions lit up the sky around them. "Your people need you, alive to speak for them in the galaxy." But Zara shook her head firmly. "I cannot abandon those who need help. This is my world, Emma. If it falls, I fall with it." The final evacuation ship lifted off, just as Zephyrian forces overran the human embassy. Captain Blake managed to escape, with 3,000 Kelovian civilians, including many children, but millions more were left behind to face the horrors of Zephyrian occupation. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes made his last stand at the great temple tree in the center of the main city, where hundreds of Kelovian elders had gathered to pray for their world. He and his remaining soldiers fought to the last bullet, but they were finally overwhelmed by sheer numbers. War Commander Voss personally oversaw the capture of Ambassador Zara, recognizing her importance as a symbol of Kelovian leadership. As she was dragged away in chains, Zara managed to activate her personal communicator one final time to send a message to the human embassy on Earth. "My dear human friends," her voice came through clearly despite the chaos around her. "Thank you for standing with us in our darkest hour. Remember us not as victims, but as people who tried to live in peace and harmony with all beings. Do not let our deaths be meaningless." The transmission ended abruptly as Zephyrian soldiers destroyed the communication equipment, but the message had already been recorded and transmitted across human space. Within hours, every human colony would hear Zara's final words and see the images of Verdania Prime burning. War Commander Voss stood among the ruins of the great tree cities and broadcast his victory message to the entire sector. "Let this be a lesson to all who would defy the Zephyrian Empire," he declared, his cold reptilian eyes showing no emotion as smoke rose from the devastated landscape behind him. "We are your masters now, and resistance brings only death and suffering." The few human survivors, including Dr. Clark, were allowed to leave on the last evacuation ship as a deliberate insult. Voss wanted witnesses to carry the news of Calovian destruction throughout human space, believing that the horror of what had happened would convince humanity to submit without a fight. Captain Blake's ship limped toward human space, carrying the traumatized refugees and the recorded testimony of the massacre. The peaceful Calovian civilization that had existed for thousands of years had been destroyed in a single day, its people killed or enslaved by an enemy that viewed kindness as weakness and mercy as foolishness. As the evacuation ship disappeared into hyperspace, Verdania Prime continued to burn behind it, the smoke from the destroyed forest cities visible from orbit as a testament to Zephyrian brutality. The galaxy had witnessed the first act of what would become known as the War of Liberation, though no one yet understood the sleeping giant that had just been awakened by the screams of dying friends. The images from Verdania Prime reached Earth on a Tuesday morning that would forever change the course of human history. President Carol Martinez sat in her office in the Human Colonial Union headquarters, watching the recorded testimony of Dr. Emma Clark for the third time as tears ran down her face. Around the conference table, the most powerful leaders in human space sat in stunned silence as they witnessed the destruction of their first alien friends. "Madam President," Dr. Clark's voice came through the speakers, her words heavy with exhaustion and grief. "I need you to understand what we saw here. The Calovians were the most peaceful beings we have ever encountered. They had no weapons, no military, no concept of deliberate violence. And the Zephyrians destroyed them simply because they could." Fleet Admiral Dan Cooper, the Supreme Commander of Human Space Forces, stood up and walked to the large window that overlooked the bustling city of New Geneva below. Cooper was a veteran of 40 years of military service, but his hands were shaking as he processed what he had just witnessed. "How many did we save?" President Martinez asked quietly. 3,000, replied Dr. Rachel Kim, the Director of Human Intelligence Services, out of a population of nearly 8 million Calovians. Captain Blake managed 6 evacuation runs before the Zephyrians made it too dangerous to continue. The silence in the room was broken by General Pete Johnson, head of Human Special Operations Command, who slammed his fist on the table with barely controlled rage. "Those monsters used our people as witnesses. They let our evacuation ships go because they wanted us to see what they did. They wanted us to be afraid." President Martinez turned to address the full cabinet. "Get me a complete analysis of public reaction across all human colonies. I need to know what our people are thinking right now." The reports that came back over the next few hours painted a picture of humanity united in fury like never before in their history. On every human world, from the industrial centers of New Pittsburgh to the agricultural colonies of Green Valley, people gathered in public squares and demanded action. The images of burning Calovian tree cities and Ambassador Zara being dragged away in chains had awakened something primal in the human psyche. Commander Lisa Park, who had served on the original Pioneer mission and personally knew many of the Calovians who had died, presented her analysis to the military leadership. Park had been promoted to head the human investigation into Zephyrian capabilities, and her report was both sobering and encouraging. The Zephyrian Empire controls 43 star systems with a combined military force of approximately 4,000 warships, Park reported to the assembled officers. On paper, they outnumber our available forces by nearly 3-1. Admiral. Cooper studied the data projections on the main screen. What about their technology and tactics? That's where it gets interesting, Park continued. Their technology is actually inferior to ours in most areas. Their ships are heavily armored but slow. Their weapons are powerful but inaccurate. And their sensors are outdated by our standards. They rely on overwhelming numbers and intimidation rather than innovation. Dr. Kim added her intelligence analysis to the briefing. More importantly, their empire is held together by fear rather than loyalty. Most of their client species serve them because they have no choice, not because they believe in Zephyrian leadership. If we can demonstrate that the Zephyrians can be defeated, many of their subject worlds might rebel. President Martinez spent 3 days meeting with representatives from every human colony, listening to their demands for action and weighing the enormous decision before her. The people were clear in their message. Humanity would not stand by while peaceful species were enslaved and murdered by alien tyrants. On Friday evening, President Martinez stood before the largest gathering of human beings in history. Every colony world was connected by hyperspace communication, and over 2 billion people watched as their leader prepared to address the greatest crisis humanity had ever faced. My fellow humans, Martinez began, her voice steady and strong. 2 months ago, we made our first contact with an alien species. The Kelovians welcomed us as friends, shared their knowledge freely, and showed us what it meant to live in harmony with the natural world. They asked nothing from us except friendship, and we gave it gladly. The president paused as images of Kelovian children playing with human children appeared on screens across human space. Last week, those friends were brutally attacked by an empire that views peace as weakness and kindness as something to be exploited. Millions of innocent beings were killed or enslaved simply because they refused to bow down to tyrants. Admiral. Cooper stood at attention behind the president as she continued. The Zephyrian Empire believes that might makes right, that the strong have the right to dominate the weak. They have sent us a message written in the blood of our friends, telling us to submit or face the same fate. Martinez looked directly into the camera, her eyes blazing with determination. Today, I send them our reply. The galaxy was warned when we first reached the stars that humanity stands by its friends, harmed them, and we bring war. Today, we honor that promise. The President's declaration of war was met with thunderous approval from across human space. Within hours, recruitment centers on every human world were overwhelmed with volunteers eager to join the liberation fleet that would carry humanity's answer to the Zephyrian Empire. Fleet Admiral Cooper immediately began mobilizing the largest military force in human history. Shipyards that had been producing civilian transports were converted to build warships. Scientists who had been working on peaceful research projects were reassigned to weapons development. The entire human economy shifted to support the war effort with a speed and efficiency that amazed even veteran military planners. Commander. Park led a covert mission to gather intelligence on Zephyrian military installations and locate surviving Kelovian prisoners. Her team consisted of the best special operations soldiers humanity had to offer, and their first priority was finding Ambassador Zara and the other captured Kelovians. The Zephyrians have established prison camps on 17 different worlds. Park reported after her team's first reconnaissance mission. The conditions are horrific, but many Kelovians are still alive. They're being used as forced labor in mining operations and weapons factories. General Johnson coordinated the development of new human military tactics specifically designed to counter Zephyrian advantages. They rely on overwhelming force and intimidation, he explained to his staff officers. So we'll use speed, precision, and surprise. Hit them hard, free the prisoners, and get out before they can bring their numbers to bear. Dr. Kim's intelligence network worked around the clock to identify weaknesses in the Zephyrian Empire. We've made contact with resistance movements on at least 12 Zephyrian-controlled worlds, she reported. These species have been waiting for someone strong enough to challenge their oppressors. If we can prove that the Zephyrians can be defeated, we'll have all eyes throughout their territory. The transformation of human society was remarkable to witness. People who had never thought about military service volunteered for dangerous missions. Scientists worked 18-hour days developing new weapons and defensive systems. Ordinary citizens donated their savings to support refugee relief efforts and military equipment procurement. President Martinez visited the Calovian refugees who had been relocated to a specially prepared facility on the peaceful world of New Eden. The survivors were being cared for by the best human doctors and xenobiologists. But the trauma of what they had experienced was evident in their haunted expressions. "We will not forget what was done to your people," Martinez promised a group of Calovian elders who had escaped the massacre. "And we will not rest until every Calovian prisoner is free and every Zephyrian war criminal is brought to justice." Elder Moss Velkin, one of the few surviving members of the Calovian Council, spoke for his people. "President Martinez, we have seen the darkness that exists in some hearts, but we have also seen the light that burns in human souls. You risk everything for friends you have known, only briefly. This gives us hope that goodness can triumph over evil." As the months passed, the human war machine grew in size and capability beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Cooper's Liberation Fleet eventually numbered over 1,500 ships, equipped with the most advanced weapons and defensive systems human science could produce. But more than ships and weapons, humanity brought something to the coming war that the Zephyrian Empire had never encountered before: the absolute determination to fight for others rather than themselves. Every human soldier knew they were not just defending their own colonies, but fighting for the freedom of innocent beings across the galaxy. The final preparations were completed on a cold morning in March when Admiral Cooper received authorization to begin offensive operations. The Liberation Fleet assembled at the edge of human space, ready to carry humanity's promise of justice to every corner of the Zephyrian Empire. "Remember," Cooper told his fleet commanders in their final briefing, "we're not just fighting to win a war. We're fighting to prove that friendship and loyalty are stronger than fear and oppression. The galaxy is watching, and we will not let them down." Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the UHS Liberation, the flagship of humanity's largest military force, as thousands of human warships prepared to jump into hyperspace for their first strike against the Zephyrian Empire. Sullivan was a combat veteran who had earned her rank through skill and courage, but even she felt the weight of history as she prepared to give the order that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. "All ships report ready for jump," announced her communications officer. "Target coordinates locked in for the Zephyrian military base at Corval 7. Sullivan nodded grimly as she thought about the intelligence reports it had led them to this moment. Corval 7 was a heavily fortified world where the Zephyrians maintained one of their largest prisoner camps, holding over 50,000 enslaved beings from dozens of different species. Among them were nearly 2,000 surviving Calovians, including Ambassador Zara Velyon. "Execute jump," Sullivan ordered, and 1,500 human warships disappeared into hyperspace in perfect formation. The Liberation Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Corval system like an avenging angel, their advanced sensors immediately detecting the Zephyrian defensive positions. The enemy had clearly not expected an attack of this magnitude, and their ships scrambled desperately to form a defensive line around their prison world. Colonel Sam Rodriguez led the first wave of Liberation forces from his command ship, coordinating the elite human commando units that would assault the prison camps directly. Rodriguez was a special operations veteran who had volunteered for this mission because his own daughter was the same age as many of the Calovian children who had been enslaved. "Remember the mission priorities," Rodriguez told his strike team. "Commanders over the tactical communications network. Prisoner safety comes first, intelligence gathering second. Everything else is secondary. We're here to save lives, not just win battles." The space battle above Corval 7 was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human ships moved with precision and coordination that amazed even their own crews, striking Zephyrian defensive positions with devastating accuracy while avoiding damage to the planet below. The advanced human weapons cut through Zephyrian armor like it was paper, and their defensive shields easily absorbed the enemy's return fire. Captain Joe Mitchell commanded the stealth ship UHS Shadowhawk, which had been specially modified for covert operations behind enemy lines. Mitchell and his crew had spent months infiltrating Zephyrian communication networks and identifying key targets throughout their empire. "Admiral Sullivan, this is Shadowhawk," Mitchell reported as his ship slipped past the enemy defenses undetected. "We've confirmed the location of the main prison complex. Uploading coordinates for the rescue teams now." The human assault on the prison camps was swift and merciless. Rodriguez's commandos landed under cover of orbital bombardment that had surgically destroyed the guard towers and defensive positions while leaving the prisoner barracks untouched. The Zephyrian guards, accustomed to terrorizing helpless civilians, fled in panic when faced with trained human soldiers who fought with the fury of avenging angels. "This is Rodriguez to all teams," the colonel transmitted as his forces secured the first prisoner compound. "We have visual confirmation of Calovian survivors. Medical teams move up immediately." The reunion between human soldiers and the Calovian prisoners was both heartbreaking and inspiring. The gentle plant people who had been tortured and enslaved for months looked up at their human rescuers with tears of joy and gratitude that moved even the hardest veteran soldiers to emotion. Ambassador Zara Vel Yan was found in an isolated cell where the Zephyrians had been trying to break her spirit through psychological torture. When Rodriguez personally freed her from her chains, she looked up at him with eyes that still held hope despite everything she had endured. "Colonel Rodriguez," Zara said weakly, her voice barely above a whisper, "I knew you would come. Humans never abandon their friends." The liberation of Corval 7 was completed within 6 hours, with over 50,000 prisoners freed and transported to safety aboard human medical ships. The Zephyrian garrison that had seemed so powerful was completely destroyed, and there, survivors fled in whatever ships could escape the human blockade. War Commander Sektar Voss received the news of the defeat while commanding the defense of the Zephyrian stronghold at Drakmor Station. For the first time in his military career, Voss felt something he had never experienced before: fear. The humans had not just defeated a Zephyrian force, they had completely annihilated it while suffering minimal casualties themselves. "Impossible," Voss growled as he studied the battle reports. "No species has ever challenged our military supremacy and survived. How can these humans be so effective?" The answer came from General Marcus Cole, who was coordinating the overall human liberation campaign from his command center on the battleship UHS Retribution. Cole had studied Zephyrian tactics for months and understood their fundamental weakness. They had never faced an enemy that refused to be intimidated. The Zephyrians built their empire on fear and overwhelming force, Cole explained to his staff officers. They're used to fighting enemies who surrender quickly or die trying to resist hopeless odds. They've never encountered an opponent with superior technology and the will to use it effectively. The liberation campaign continued across multiple fronts as human forces struck Zephyrian installations throughout their empire. Each victory brought thousands of freed prisoners and valuable intelligence about enemy operations, while also inspiring resistance movements on occupied worlds to rise up against their oppressors. Captain Nenia Ross, now commanding a full squadron of human warships, led the assault on the Zephyrian fleet base at Terminus Prime. The battle demonstrated the complete technological superiority of human forces, as Ross's ships destroyed twice their number of enemy vessels without losing a single ship. "This is Ross to Liberation Command," she reported after the victory. "Terminus Prime is secure. We've captured intact Zephyrian ships and their complete tactical database. The intelligence value is enormous. The psychological impact of these victories rippled throughout the Zephyrian Empire as news of human successes spread to every occupied world. Species that had been enslaved for decades began to believe that freedom was possible, and resistance movements that had been dormant for years suddenly came back to life. Dr. Rachel Kim's intelligence networks reported uprisings on 17 different Zephyrian-controlled worlds within 2 weeks of the first human victories. "The Empire is fracturing," Kim reported to President Martinez. "Client species are declaring independence faster than the Zephyrians can respond. Their whole system of control is collapsing." War Commander Voss made increasingly desperate attempts to stop the human advance, including threats to execute all prisoners if the humans did not withdraw. This strategy backfired spectacularly when Colonel Rodriguez led a daring rescue operation that freed nearly all the threatened prisoners and captured Voss himself in the process. "You cannot defeat the Zephyrian Empire," Voss snarled at Rodriguez during his interrogation. "We have ruled this sector for over a century. Our power is absolute." Rodriguez looked at the defeated war commander with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Your empire was built on the suffering of innocent people. That's not power. That's just cruelty. And cruelty always falls to courage in the end." The final battle of the Liberation Campaign took place above Verdania Prime itself, where human forces came to reclaim the Colovian homeworld from its Zephyrian occupiers. Admiral Sullivan personally led the assault, knowing that this victory would be both strategic and symbolic. The Zephyrian forces, defending Verdania Prime, fought with the desperation of cornered animals, but they were no match for the coordinated fury of the human liberation fleet. The orbital battle lasted only 3 hours before the last Zephyrian ships either fled or were destroyed. Ambassador Zara stood beside Admiral Sullivan on the bridge of the Liberation as human landing craft descended toward the surface of her homeworld. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for keeping your promise." The liberation of Verdania Prime marked the effective end of the Zephyrian Empire as a military force. Most of their client species had already declared independence. Their military was shattered, and their leadership was either dead or in human custody. The galaxy had witnessed the complete transformation of the balance of power in less than 1 year. President Martinez traveled to Verdania Prime for the ceremony establishing the Galactic Protection Accords, a defensive alliance dedicated to protecting peaceful species from aggressive expansion. Representatives from over 30 liberated worlds attended the signing, creating the foundation for a new era of interstellar cooperation. "Today we plant the seeds of a better galaxy," Martinez declared as Colovian children played among the new saplings that were already beginning to grow in the ruins of their ancient cities. "A galaxy where friendship is stronger than fear, where cooperation triumphs over conquest, and where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them." Ambassador Zara planted the first new tree in the rebuilt central grove of Verdania Prime, using soil that had been enriched with the ashes of those who had died defending their world.